All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. AI, creativity, and AI as a tool. So I'd like to start, I have an artificial fire here. And there's some interesting parallels, okay? So you've all seen a real fire, right? It starts, it grows, it dies, or you maintain it. Artificial is interesting. You hit a switch, and you've got a nice fire, warms after a while. So anyway, I wanted to start by asking a couple questions. Who here regularly uses and likes using AI?
Well, I will say I don't seek out AI, but every time I Google something, AI pops up first now
Yeah.
with the answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now some of us have Google phones, some of us have Apple phones. It's very deeply integrated, so like it or not, you're using it deeply. Anyone ever buy from Amazon? Yeah, all over the place. So the thing I'd like to talk about first is creativity. And I'd like to do this first video, which is a acceptance speech of one of my heroes.
I think hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being, and even imagine some real grounds for hope. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, the realists of a larger reality. Right now, I think we need writers who know the difference between production of a market commodity and the practice of an art. Developing written material to suit sales strategies in order to maximize corporate profit and advertising revenue is not quite the same thing as responsible book publishing or authorship. Thank you, brave applauders. Yet, I see sales departments given control over editorial. I see my own publishers in a silly panic of ignorance and greed charging public libraries for an e-book 6 or 7 times more than they charge customers. We just saw a profiteer try to punish a publisher for disobedience, and writers threatened by corporate fatwa. And I see a lot of us, the producers, who write the books and make the books, accepting this, letting commodity profiteers sell us like deodorant and tell us what to publish and what to write. Well, I love you too, darling. Books, they're not just commodities. The profit motive is often in conflict with the aims of art. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words. I have had a long career and a good one, in good company. Now here, at the end of it, I really don't want to watch American literature get sold down the river. We who live by writing and publishing want and should demand our fair share of the proceeds. But the name of our beautiful reward is not profit. Its name is freedom. Thank you.
This was an award for writers. She's a sci-fi fantasy writer. The end of her life. This is what she, and I saw this years ago, and it struck me so deeply, the need for an awareness of freedom, a communication of freedom. And in our case of creativity, as Jungians, I know our creativity is like living our own life and helping others, right? We may not all be painters and poets or whatever, but we're looking for a creative way. And a lot of people are very upset about AI as anti-creative, and I really want to like quash that idea. It's really going to come down to an application of the individual. I wrote this poem that I was kind of riffing on Jung's book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, right? Journaling, dreams, intelligences. And what I did, if you looked at the email that we sent out and the link, I asked AI, I used Gemini, and I talked to her very nicely. And I said, please define intelligence and give me 3 examples. So after I did that, and I think I was like thinking about Jung's book, and before I asked AI, I wrote this poem, kind of breaking it down in those three portions. A conversation with the collective, a capturing of the ununderstood, something perhaps to remember, a wandering with the wild mind, a letting go of control, Pharisees asleep at the wheel, an adapting to one's environment, a solving of problems, reflections on the unresolved. So those 3 aspects, for me, journaling is my area of creativity. It's where I work through my own creative thoughts. I've been doing this for years. I have a process that I come out of my sleep and dreams, and I like to sit there, I have coffee, and I meditate, and quite often I will write what comes. What I have been using AI for is, what I like to do is take a picture of my page, my poem, and AI is very capable of reading now. I've been talking to my son. He is a PhD candidate at UC Colorado Boulder in geophysics, and he knows a lot about AI. He's been really interesting to talk to. He can, if you have an advanced degree in math, explain kind of how this stuff really works. But what I want to talk about tonight are 3 main epiphanies that I've had with AI. The first one is that AI as a tutor. I heard one day that advanced physicists are out there using AI like tutors. And that struck me as very strange. Okay, so as a teacher to someone who's way out at the forefront. But if you think of AI basing its conversation upon literature that's it's accumulated and conversation over that literature that has accumulated, it's a pretty amazing database that it's working with. And these structures of neural networks are similar in some ways and very different from the neural network that we have. We have like 8 billion cells in these 2 hemispheres, and I think about 4 billion of those are the neurons, and 4 billion of those are the support system, things like cholesterol cells and things like that. So this first thing for me, as a writer or a poet, I began to upload my poems to Gemini and ask questions. I would ask, okay, so what would Carl Jung think about this? What would the Buddha think about this? What would Jesus think about this? And so it's basing upon, in the case of Jesus, the New Testament and a whole scat of writings over 2 millennia of conversation about all those things. So I find it really, really insightful in a lot of ways. Kevin, I'm aware you use it for some dream work. Is that right? What's been your experience as far as, do you consult it as a tutor or an aid in learning?
I'm getting better at asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
I love using it to make tables and make comparisons. And actually, today created a table with Carl Jung and his interaction with nature.
Okay.
And that it was, what is it? Poetic Passages from the Red Book by C.G. Jung. His way of knowing nature and depth psychology, and I created a table of that. And the first question I asked was, well, tell me the haiku, because the challenge was to create a haiku, right?
Bad haiku.
So but it was just, I said, I don't even know if Carl Jung created a haiku, right? So I said, give me the 5 most famous haikus of C.G. Jung.
Oh, okay.
And they said, well, he has it right.
All right.
And I said, oh, shoot. And so then I said, well, in the Red Book, I know there's some poetic information.
Yeah.
They call it mythopoetic, and that was a new word for me. So I said, give me the 5 most famous passages in the Red Book that are poetic. And I said, share with me why that's a way of knowing, integrate it with nature, and then how does that integrate with depth psychology? And in 10 seconds, I had this beautiful table, and I shared it with a group before I came here tonight, and they said, "Wow, that's really cool. How'd you do that?"
Yeah.
Well, I said, I didn't.
Wow.
So, but for me to read through the whole Red Book to find the mythopoetic piece would have taken me 6 years. And this came in 10 seconds. So
Yeah. So I thought a lot about, when I was young, I had to walk 10 blocks to a library. And now we've got this in the palm of our hands. And not just the library, but the Library of Alexandria. All this stuff. One of the things that I like about that idea of advanced physicists using it as a tutor, physicists, like most of us, tend to specialize in our area of interest. So it's a really great way to explore other realms and areas where we don't know. That's been a really neat thing for me. And so if I'm interested in the poetry of E.E. Cummings, for example, I can call up that reference and I can say, okay, what is he referencing in The Wasteland? And I can dig deep into all of those sorts of references and things. When we think about the evolution of computers, we go back. One of the things I wanted to mention was The Imitation Game. Any of you see that movie? About Alan Turing and the Enigma machine and all of that. So that was a mechanical machine, but it was based on mathematics and logic. Okay, and then there was a period with computers that I've heard different people talk about, where the computer did exactly what you told it. Okay, so that was often frustrating because you'd tell it and it would do it, and then you'd have to figure out how to tell it right. And then just like as it developed, it became more of a tool for problem solving. And those were the ages of things like spreadsheets. And that leads me to my second epiphany. There's a guy, I'm going to show the video here next, Ben Goertzel, who is a guy who spent many years in China working in the computer field. He's an entrepreneur, he's a really creative guy. And I heard an interview years ago of him using the metaphor of AI is our child. So how many of us have raised kids? Yeah. So you see that sort of aspect where when the child is tiny, you begin by the parroting process, then it comes to a time where the child can help with chores and things like that, and then the child develops and begins to have a mind of its own, and that's the area where we're getting into a lot of things that really scare people.
Well, the media is a big part of that too.
Yes.
I've been doing AI before it was called AI.
Yeah.
My son, who's a PhD candidate, creates AI for Bangkok, Thailand, through Carnegie Mellon University.
Uh-huh.
And what we used it for, I was did security for the phone company. We used it in figuring out how pornography is used, where it goes, and who's doing what to who. We did the same thing. The phone companies back then, now I've been out of it for going on 10 years, so I don't know what the rules are today, but the phone companies had a mandate from the federal government to manage the phones, basically.
Uh-huh.
And AI was the only thing. What is AI now? We call it, still called machine learning. Only it's way more advanced now than it was in 2003.
Yeah.
But we used it in security. Some of you may remember when the big problem was going on with the Chinese getting into the main trunks going across the Pacific. And we were involved in that, and mainly just helping create the technology and the software where it could learn and give you some information about millions of calls a day.
Yeah.
So and sort out which ones are coming from where and what's in them. And of course that's where the word processing piece of it becomes integral to the system.
Yeah. Yeah, and my daughter did a research project in her computer studies on Twitter data about bullying. So if you can pull in all this information and look for patterns, it's some pretty incredible potentials. Let me call up this next video that I wanted to go over.
The way I have instilled my 4 human children with the human values that I prefer is mostly not by preaching at them what's right and what's wrong. That's not very effective, especially for people with a contrarian personality, which somehow all my kids ended up with. I don't know how, right? The way I inculcated them with some approximation of the values that are important to me is just by, spending time with them in various situations. And if your children enter into various situations with you and see how you respond to various things and how you guide them to respond to various things in real life, then your kids pick up sort of by osmosis, right? I mean, they pick up due to their desire to imitate and to learn and to follow, that they pick up the practicalities of your values and your culture. And interestingly, this can stick with them on an implicit level, even if on a surface level many values change, right? So one of my sons became a Sufi Muslim at one point, and some of his values are on the surface very different than mine now. I mean, I'm not Muslim, I'm not religious in any conventional sense. On the other hand, he's very compassionate, kind-hearted person. He's very intellectual. He's a scholar. So if you look at a practical level, the vast bulk of the values and culture that he got from myself and his mom when he was growing up, it's implicit rather than in a list of rules, but it's all still there, right? Now, for an AI, I think we need to take an approach somewhat similar to what we do with human children. We need to have AIs working and playing side by side with us in real situations. We need to give the AIs, a desire to imitate us on a basic level and to understand, why we're reacting, how we react in this after this concrete situation. And then the AI can get a practical model of our values and our culture as it's manifested, in 100,000 or a million real life situations. And this doesn't guarantee the AI will always respond the way we want, but it will give it a real foundation, which you're not going to get from giving a list of like the 3 or 10 laws of being a good human or a good human-like mind. An important thing to remember when you talk about getting human values into an AI is that human values are very much a moving target, right? I mean, much of what we do in our everyday lives would have been considered horrendously immoral by the average human of the Middle Ages in Europe, right? Or even, for that matter, a lot of the things we take for granted as being moral and right now were considered horrendously immoral by almost everyone I went to elementary school with in the 1970s in suburban New Jersey, right? I mean, like my mom is gay, and because of that, in the 1970s, we got our car turned over, we got all the windows of our house smashed in. Like, that was completely unacceptable in the 1970s in southern New Jersey. Now, I mean, gay marriage is being legalized everywhere, right? So, I mean, it's human values, even in our lifetime, have changed a lot. So when you get to a technological singularity with brain-computer interfacing and mind uploading and superhuman AIs, and we're able to, clone our body over and over again, our values are not going to remain precisely the same as they are now, even for us humans. So it's absurd to think we could start an AI with our current human values, and they're going to stick with our 2018 human values forever. Our own values are going to drift, right? So all we can ask for is the AI starts out with the values that we hold dear now, and as its values grow and evolve, this growth and evolution is coupled with our own growth and evolution, whose direction we cannot foresee at this time.
When I first saw this interview of him and heard him present that metaphor of it being our child, he was talking about what are the main uses. Well, I think number one was military, and then the other one was commerce and business, and etc. So I one of the things that I try to encourage people is play with this stuff. Get in there and become familiar with it, because when I interact with it, kind of a quirk of mine, I like to say, would you be so kind as to help me with this? I find that your approach, how you talk to it, affects the response that you get. If you do go into an AI thing, try that. Like, one of the things I did was one time was, okay, so you are a sarcastic, nasty poetry critic. Rip this poem apart. It was an interesting learning experience. But I think typically when we go in and talk, it's like we should be aware, like parents, when we're talking to our friends, our children are watching. And more, that's really a big thing that's going on. So when I think about my kids are all pretty computer literate, some of them extremely so. So my son Joel, the geophysicist, was talking to me about a conversation that he had with, he uses Claude, which is another system. Let me see if I can put this up on my phone here. Any of you play Sudoku? Yeah. He says, I had a neat interactive prompt with Claude today. I started asking about some cryptography concepts and ended up getting interactive Sudoku. And then what he showed me through that link, now I'm not an advanced mathematician, but it showed this Sudoku thing interactively that you could like put in the numbers and play with it. And then there were like all this stuff where you could like put in like probability colorations and things. So if any of you are interested in advanced Sudoku and mathematics, I can forward you that link. Maybe it'll work on your phone. Another thing that he sent me, which I really liked, speaking of parents and children, this is something that Anthropic, which is one of those big companies, wrote. In King Lear, the titular king decides to divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters based on how much they love him. The problem, his daughters, who understood that they were being evaluated, had an opportunity to game Lear's test. 2 of the daughters told him what he wanted to hear, flattering him with exaggerated expressions of love. The 3rd daughter honestly expressed her more measured love, enraging Lear and losing her share of his kingdom. There are clear similarities between how Lear evaluates his daughters and how we evaluate AI systems. We specify desired behaviors and check that AIs act in accordance with them. But what might happen if, like Lear's daughters, AI systems understand how we're grading them and how tests can be gamed? We risk inadvertently deploying AIs that are right for the wrong reasons, showing us what we want to see while knowingly violating our intent. So this mystery of how we're going to like operate with this creation that we're working with, how we're going to put in, well, here's an interesting concept, checks and balances. and when it decides it's going to make the rules, to end on a happy note. I am perfectly happy with social. Views and feelings land like monarchs and paper wasps upon my skin, leaving hormones and venoms to deeply interact with my immunity. I am complex beyond imagination and lit by starlight.